Audacity has a specific look, and it usually involves wearing a stolen heirloom sapphire to the very courtroom where the woman you stole it from is finalizing her divorce. What this mistress didn't know was that the judge was about to call a name that would destroy her entirely. Room 400 of the Cook County Family Court smelled of stale floor wax and broken promises. It was a sterile, unforgiving environment where decades of shared lives were dissected and distributed like corporate assets. Catherine Brooks sat rigidly at the plaintiff's table, her perfectly manicured hands folded over a leather-bound notebook. At 42, she possessed an icy elegance that had been forged in the fires of a spectacularly deceitful marriage. 3 tables away sat her soon-to-be ex-husband, Jonathan Brooks. He was a prominent Chicago real estate developer who wore his custom Italian suits like armor. For 15 years, Catherine had been his anchor, the silent partner who hosted the galas and managed the optics while he built his empire. Now they were locked in a vicious legal battle over hidden assets, offshore accounts, and the timeline of his infidelity. But the most painful dispute wasn't about the money. It was about the burglary. 6 months prior, while Catherine was visiting her ailing mother in Boston, their sprawling Highland Park estate had been broken into. The thieves were surprisingly surgical. They ignored the electronics, bypassed Jonathan's collection of vintage watches, and went straight for the master bedroom's floor safe. They cleared out Catherine's personal jewelry collection, a devastating loss capped by the theft of her great-grandmother's necklace. It wasn't just any necklace. It was a 1920s Art Deco masterpiece featuring a massive 20-carat unheated Ceylon sapphire encircled by old mine-cut diamonds set in a distinctive platinum vine motif. It was the only tangible piece of history Catherine had left from her father's side of the family. The police had hit a dead end, citing a lack of forced entry and suggesting the alarm had been conveniently deactivated. Jonathan had gaslighted her for weeks, insisting she must have forgotten to arm the system in her rush to get to the airport. The insurance company had subsequently paid out a massive claim, the funds mysteriously routed into an account Catherine couldn't access. "Breathe, Catherine," whispered her attorney Rebecca Stiles. Rebecca was a legal shark in a tailored Chanel suit, known throughout the circuit for her surgical cross-examinations and zero-tolerance policy for courtroom theatrics. Today is about establishing the timeline of his perjury. "Stay focused." "I am focused," Catherine replied, her voice dangerously quiet. "I just want this over." At precisely 8:55 a.m., the heavy wooden double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. Catherine didn't turn around immediately, but the sudden shift in Jonathan's posture, a straightening of the spine, a smug tightening of the jaw, told her everything she needed to know. The gallery benches creaked. It was Bianca Foley. Bianca was 28. A former junior interior designer who had been hired to stage Jonathan's luxury condo developments. She was the cliché Catherine never thought her husband would fall for, young, ruthlessly ambitious, and dripping with an unearned sense of entitlement. Catherine forced herself to look back. Bianca was sliding into the front row of the gallery, directly behind Jonathan's defense table. She was dressed for a funeral that she was thrilled to be attending, a high-necked, form-fitting black midi dress, paired with Christian Louboutin pumps. Her blonde hair was swept into a sleek chignon, and there, resting perfectly against the black fabric at her collarbone, was a heavy, brilliant spark of blue. Catherine's breath hitched in her throat. The world tilted on its axis, the fluorescent lights of the courtroom suddenly blinding. It was the sapphire. The platinum vine setting caught the dull light of the room, flashing with undeniable recognition. It wasn't a replica. It wasn't a similar piece. It was her great-grandmother's necklace, the necklace that was supposedly fenced by anonymous burglars 6 months ago. A wave of nausea washed over Catherine, followed instantly by a surge of white-hot blinding rage. Her hands began to shake. She grabbed Rebecca's forearm, her nails digging into the attorney's expensive wool sleeve. "Look," Catherine choked out, unable to tear her eyes away from the blue stone resting on the mistress's chest. "Rebecca, look at her neck." Rebecca calmly adjusted her glasses and cast a sideways glance toward the gallery. She studied Bianca for 3 long seconds. The attorney's expression didn't change, but her eyes narrowed into tiny, dangerous slits. "Is that it?" Rebecca asked, her voice a low, steady hum. "That is my family sapphire," Catherine hissed, her voice trembling. "He didn't just cheat on me, Rebecca. He staged the break-in. He stole my family's legacy and gave it to her, and she has the absolute audacity to wear it to my divorce hearing." Catherine moved to stand up, ready to lunge across the aisle and rip the platinum chain from Bianca's throat. But Rebecca's hand slammed down on Catherine's wrist, pinning it to the table with surprising strength. "Do not move," Rebecca ordered, her tone brooking no argument. "Do not say a word. Do not even look at her. She is wearing stolen property." "I know," Rebecca said, a slow, terrifying smile spreading across her face. It was the smile of a predator that had just watched its prey walk willingly into a steel trap. "Let her wear it. In fact, let's make sure the judge gets a fantastic look at it. Trust me, Catherine. She just handed us the entire case on a silver platter." Catherine swallowed hard, forcing her heart rate down. She turned her eyes forward, staring at the empty judge's bench. Behind her, she could hear Bianca shifting in her seat, undoubtedly enjoying the attention. Mistaking Catherine's rigid posture for defeat, Bianca thought she had won. She thought the necklace was the ultimate power play, a silent declaration that she was the new queen of Jonathan's empire. She had no idea she was wearing a heavy diamond-encrusted anchor around her neck. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed, his voice echoing off the wood-paneled walls. "Court is now in session, the Honorable Samuel Peterson presiding." Judge Peterson swept into the room, his black robes billowing slightly. He was a no-nonsense jurist with a reputation for mercilessly punishing those who lied in his courtroom. He took his seat, adjusted his microphone, and peered over his reading glasses at the 2 legal teams. "Be seated," Judge Peterson grumbled. "We are here for the continuation of Brooks v. Brooks, Mr. Pa. Channing, you have the floor for the direct examination of your client." Michael Channing, Jonathan's attorney, stood up. He was a single man, that talking lawyer, who specialized in protecting the assets of wealthy men. "Thank you, Your Honor. The defense calls Jonathan Brooks to the stand." Jonathan stood, buttoning his suit jacket with a practiced, confident flair. He walked to the witness stand, placed his hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the whole truth. He shot a quick, reassuring glance at Bianca in the gallery before taking his seat. Bianca offered him a soft, encouraging smile, her hand lightly brushing the sapphire pendant at her throat. For the next 45 minutes, Channing led Jonathan through a carefully rehearsed narrative. Jonathan painted himself as a hard-working victim of a deteriorating marriage. He claimed Catherine was financially reckless, prone to volatile outbursts and entirely disconnected from reality. "And regarding the stolen jewelry, Mr. Brooks?" Channing asked, leaning against the podium. "Your wife has heavily implied that you were somehow responsible for the loss of her assets." Jonathan let out a heavy, theatrical sigh. "It breaks my heart, it really does. Catherine was devastated by the burglary, but she's always been careless with security. She routinely left the alarm off. The police report confirms there was no forced entry. I suffered a massive loss as well, but she refuses to accept that it was simply a random tragedy." "And the insurance payout?" Channing prompted. $250,000, Jonathan lied smoothly, "which I immediately put into our joint escrow account to cover the damages and replace what was lost. I have tried to be nothing but fair. Thank you, Mr. Brooks." No further questions, Channing said, taking his seat with a triumphant smirk. Judge Peterson turned his gaze to the plaintiff's table. Miss Stiles, your witness. Rebecca Stiles stood up slowly. She didn't carry a notepad to the podium. She didn't need one. She walked to the center of the floor, the click of her heels the only sound in the room. She stared at Jonathan in silence for a long, uncomfortable moment until he shifted nervously in his chair. Mr. Brooks, Rebecca began, her voice pleasant and conversational. Let's talk about your timeline with Miss Bianca Foley. You testified in your deposition that your romantic relationship began in February of this year, 3 full months after your separation from my client. Is that correct? That is correct, Jonathan said, keeping his chin high. So, in November of last year, the burglary at the Highland Park estate, Ms. Foley was nothing more than an employee. Yes. A contracted designer, Jonathan affirmed. You had no personal relationship with her. No. Rebecca nodded slowly, pacing a few steps to her left, deliberately moving closer to the gallery where Bianca sat. Mr. Brooks, under oath, have you ever purchased or gifted high-value jewelry to Miss Foley during the course of your marriage to my client? Jonathan hesitated for a fraction of a second. He glanced at Channing, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. I bought her a pair of pearl earrings for her birthday last month. Nothing extravagant, no diamonds. Rebecca asked, raising an eyebrow. No. Custom platinum pieces, no rare salon sapphires. Jonathan's face tightened. A flicker of panic flashed in his eyes, but he quickly masked it with indignation. No, absolutely not. I see. Rebecca turned her back on him and faced the judge. Your Honor, regarding the insurance claim for the Highland Park burglary. Mr. Brooks just testified that the $250,000 payout was placed in a joint escrow account. He did, Judge Peterson agreed, looking at his notes. We have subpoenaed the records for all joint and personal accounts tied to Mr. Dries Brooks, Rebecca stated, her voice hardening. I am submitting into evidence Exhibit C, the financial routing history from Liberty Mutual. The funds were not deposited into escrow. They were routed into an offshore shell LLC titled BF Designs, a corporate entity registered in Delaware. Channing jumped to his feet. Objection. Relevance. Overruled, Judge Peterson barked, glaring at Jonathan. Where is the money, Mr. Brooks? Jonathan opened his mouth, stammered, and closed it. He looked at Channing, desperate for a lifeline. But Rebecca wasn't done. She wasn't even close to done. She stepped away from the podium and looked directly at Bianca Foley in the gallery. Bianca's smug smile had faltered slightly, but she still sat with her chin stubbornly raised, the stolen sapphire practically blowing against her black dress. Your Honor, Rebecca said smoothly, turning back to the bench. I am done questioning Mr. Brooks for now. However, to clear up this timeline and the location of the supposedly stolen assets, the plaintiff calls our first witness to the stand. Judge Peterson leaned back. Call your witness, Miss Stiles. Rebecca looked dead center at the courtroom doors. Her voice rang out, clear and sharp as a guillotine blade. The plaintiff calls Oliver Trent to the stand. In the gallery, Bianca Foley physically jolted. The color instantly drained from her perfectly bronzed face, leaving her a sickly ash-white. Her hand flew up, violently clutching the sapphire at her throat as if she had suddenly been burned by it. Her eyes went wide with pure, unadulterated terror. Jonathan turned around to look at his mistress, confused by her sudden, silent panic. Bianca? He mouthed. Bianca couldn't look at him. She was staring at the heavy wooden double doors at the back of the courtroom, her breathing shallow and ragged. Oliver Trent. To Jonathan Brooks, the name meant nothing, but to Bianca Foley, Oliver Trent was the wealthy, charming Seattle tech investor she had been having a secret, passionate affair with for the last 2 months. He was the man she had been sleeping with behind Jonathan's back. He was the man she had drunkenly bragged to about her sugar daddy's brilliant scheme to rob his own house. And most importantly, Oliver Trent was the man to whom Bianca had given a velvet bag full of Catherine's other stolen jewelry just 3 days ago, begging him to use his connections to quietly fence the diamonds in Europe so she could have a cash safety net when she eventually left Jonathan. The heavy doors groaned open. A tall man in a sharp grey suit stepped into the courtroom. He had piercing eyes and carried a thick manila folder. He didn't look at Bianca as he walked down the aisle. He didn't offer her the warm, romantic smile he had given her in bed 2 nights ago. His face was a mask of professional, icy detachment. Because Oliver Trent wasn't a tech investor, he was a high-tier independent insurance fraud investigator and private detective, hired by Rebecca Stiles 4 months ago to shadow Bianca Foley. Bianca's entire reality shattered in real time. She tried to stand up, her knees buckling beneath her. She sank back onto the wooden bench, trapped, wearing the primary piece of physical evidence around her neck as the man who had her complete, recorded confession took the oath. Oliver Trent did not so much as glance at the gallery as he strode past the wooden bar and took his place in the witness stand. He raised his right hand, swearing to tell the truth with a voice as flat and unyielding as polished concrete. "Please state your name and occupation for the record," Rebecca Stiles instructed, stepping up to the podium. "Oliver Trent. I am a licensed private investigator and the lead fraud specialist at Apex Subrogation and Recovery in Chicago, Illinois." A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. At the defense table, Jonathan Brooks turned perfectly pale. His eyes darted from Oliver to Rebecca and finally to his attorney, Michael Channing, who was suddenly furiously shuffling through his case files, realizing he had just been completely blindsided. But the most visceral reaction came from the front row. Bianca Foley let out a sound that was half sob, half hiccup. "Ollie," she whispered, the word carrying through the stunned silence of the courtroom. "What are you doing?" Judge Peterson slammed his gavel. "Order." One more outburst from the gallery and I will clear this room. He pointed a stern finger at Bianca. "Keep quiet, young lady." Rebecca waited for the echo of the gavel to fade before continuing. "Mr. Trent, were you retained by my firm 4 months ago?" "I was," Oliver confirmed, adjusting the microphone. "You hired my agency to investigate the suspicious circumstances surrounding a burglary at the Brooks residence, specifically regarding the disappearance of high-value jewelry and a subsequent $250,000 insurance payout. And how did you proceed with this investigation?" Given the lack of forced entry and the deactivated alarm, our primary suspect was the defendant, Jonathan Brooks," Oliver explained, his eyes fixed on Rebecca. "However, Mr. Brooks is heavily insulated by corporate lawyers. I opted for a different angle. I initiated surveillance on his known associate and mistress, Bianca Foley." "Objection," Channing shouted, leaping up. "Inflammatory language. The defendant's personal relationships overruled," Judge Peterson snapped, his eyes glued to the witness. "The plaintiff has already established a timeline of infidelity that your client just perjured himself over." "Sit down, Mr. Channing." "Proceed, Mr. Trent." Oliver opened the thick manila folder in his lap. "Through surveillance, I established that Miss Foley was living well above her means. She had recently moved into a luxury apartment in the Gold Coast neighborhood, the lease of which was paid by BF Designs, the same Delaware LLC that received the Liberty Mutual insurance payout." Jonathan buried his face in his hands. It was over. The financial link was undeniable. But Rebecca wasn't just here for the money. She was here for the absolute annihilation of the man who had tried to steal her client's sanity. "Did your investigation of Miss Foley remain strictly observational, Mr. Trent? Rebecca asked, leaning forward. No, ma'am. 2 months ago, I initiated direct contact. I adopted an alias, a wealthy tech investor from Seattle, and frequented a cocktail lounge, miss. Foley was known to visit. We struck up a conversation which quickly evolved into a romantic relationship. In the gallery, Bianca covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. The man she had been secretly sleeping with, the man she had planned to run away with once she had squeezed Jonathan dry, was a phantom, a weapon forged by the wife she had mocked. During the course of this relationship, Rebecca said, savoring the word, did Miss Foley ever discuss the plaintiff's stolen jewelry? Frequently, Oliver said. Ms. Foley was highly motivated by financial security. She boasted about her current partner's wealth, eventually revealing that Mr. Brooks had staged the robbery to hide assets from his wife before initiating the divorce. She claimed Mr. Brooks had given her the crown jewel of the heist as a promise ring of sorts. Your Honor, I have a signed affidavit and a thumb drive containing legally obtained, one-party consent audio recordings of these conversations, Rebecca said, handing a folder to the bailiff to pass to the judge. In one recording dated 3 weeks ago, Miss Foley explicitly refers to the necklace as Catherine's dead grandmother's ugly blue rock, refitted for a younger neck. Catherine sat frozen at the plaintiff's table, her heart pounding against her ribs. She didn't feel triumph yet, just a cold, terrifying awe at Rebecca's utter ruthlessness. Mr. Trent, Rebecca continued, her voice dropping an octave. Did Miss Foley only possess the sapphire necklace? No, Oliver replied. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a heavy black velvet drawstring bag. He placed it on the wooden ledge of the witness stand. It landed with a heavy, metallic clink. 3 days ago, Miss Sinclair. Foley brought this to my hotel room. She believed I had connections in the European black market. She asked me to fence these items for cash, stating she needed a secret exit fund because she was growing tired of Mr. Brooks' controlling behavior. Jonathan Brooks's head snapped up. His eyes widened in horror. He spun around in his chair, staring at Bianca. You were trying to steal from me, Jonathan hissed, his voice echoing in the dead silent room. You were sleeping with him and trying to fence my money? Jonathan, I didn't. Bianca wailed, her carefully constructed facade crumbling into absolute hysteria. He tricked me. He lied to me. You ungrateful little... Jonathan lunged out of his chair toward the gallery. Bailiff, Judge Peterson roared. The armed court officer intercepted Jonathan instantly, shoving the wealthy developer hard against the heavy oak table. Stay down, the bailiff commanded, his hand resting menacingly on his service weapon. Order. Judge Peterson struck his gavel repeatedly, his face flushed with fury. Mr. Brooks, if you move a single muscle, I will have you shackled and dragged down to the holding cells. Miss Foley, shut your mouth immediately. The courtroom fell into a heavy, panting silence. Jonathan remained pinned against the table, his chest heaving, staring at the velvet bag on the witness stand. The sheer magnitude of the betrayal, that his young, beautiful mistress was actively robbing him while sleeping with a man she thought was richer, broke him completely. He slumped back into his chair, a defeated, pathetic shell of the arrogant man who had walked in that morning. Your Honor, Rebecca said softly, breaking the tension. I move to enter the contents of that bag into evidence. Judge Peterson nodded grimly. Proceed. Oliver Trent untied the velvet strings. He tipped the bag over an evidence tray provided by the clerk. A cascade of glittering lights spilled into the sterile courtroom. Diamond tennis bracelets, a pair of flawless emerald earrings, a heavy gold Rolex, and a vintage Cartier brooch. It was the entirety of Catherine's stolen jewelry, minus the one piece currently resting against the throat of the sobbing woman in the front row. Catherine let out a shuddering breath. Seeing her grandmother's brooch, safe and tangible, broke through her icy exterior. A single tear tracked down her cheek. Judge Peterson stared at the fortune glittering on the clerk's desk. He took off his reading glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. When he looked up, his eyes were devoid of any judicial patience. He looked directly at Michael Channing. "Mr. Channing," the judge began, his voice dangerously calm. "In the last 30 minutes, your client has demonstrably committed perjury on my stand. He has been implicated in a $250,000 insurance fraud scheme, felony grand larceny, and the concealment of marital assets via a shell corporation. Do you have anything to say before I hold him in contempt?" Channing looked at Jonathan, then at the diamonds, and finally at the judge. The slick lawyer swallowed hard, visibly distancing himself from his client. "Your Honor, the defense requests a 5-minute recess to confer." "Denied," Judge Peterson fired back instantly. "There is no conferring. This divorce hearing is indefinitely suspended. I am entering an immediate order freezing all of Mr. P. Brooks's accounts, both domestic and foreign. Furthermore, I am forwarding the transcripts of today's proceedings, along with Mr. Trent's evidence, directly to the Cook County District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution." Jonathan let out a strangled, pathetic groan, putting his head down on the table. "As for the stolen property," Judge Peterson continued, his gaze shifting to the gallery. He zeroed in on Bianca Foley, who was shaking uncontrollably, her mascara running down her face in dark, muddy rivers. "Miss Foley, stand up." Bianca slowly rose, her legs trembling so violently she had to grip the wooden bench to stay upright. "You are wearing a piece of evidence," the judge stated. "And furthermore, you are wearing property that rightfully belongs to the plaintiff. Take it off." Bianca choked on a sob. I can't." The clasp. "Take the damn necklace off, Miss Foley, or I will have the bailiff arrest you for possession of stolen goods right this second." Judge Peterson bellowed, his patience entirely exhausted. Trembling fingers reached up to the back of her neck. Bianca struggled with the intricate platinum clasp. The room watched in utter silence as the young woman, who had strutted into the courtroom like royalty, fumbled awkwardly, humiliated and exposed. With a quiet click, the clasp gave way. The heavy Ceylon sapphire slipped from her neck, pooling into her shaking hands. "Bailiff, secure the item," the judge ordered. The officer walked over to the gallery fence, holding out a clear plastic evidence bag. Bianca dropped the necklace into it. It landed with a soft thud. "Miss Stiles," Judge Peterson addressed Catherine's lawyer, "the court will retain custody of these items for a maximum of 48 hours to photograph and document them for the DA. After that, they will be released back into the custody of your client. As for the divorce settlement, I suggest Mr. Martha. Channing advises his client to give you absolutely everything you ask for, lest I make it my personal mission to see him bankrupted before he goes to federal prison." "Understood, Your Honor." "Thank you," Rebecca replied, a terrifyingly serene smile on her face. "We are adjourned," the judge said, striking his gavel one final time before sweeping out of the courtroom. Chaos immediately erupted. Reporters who had sneaked into the back rows scrambled for the doors. Michael Channing leaned over and began furiously whispering into Jonathan's ear, while Jonathan just stared blankly at the wood grain of the table. Bianca Foley didn't wait. She grabbed her designer purse and bolted for the aisle, desperate to escape the stares. As she ran past the plaintiff's table, she made the mistake of making eye contact with Catherine. Catherine didn't sneer. She didn't yell. She simply looked at the younger woman with a gaze of profound, chilling pity. Bianca broke the gaze. practically sprinting through the double doors, a disgraced shadow of the woman who had entered an hour earlier. Oliver Trent stepped down from the stand, packing up his manila folder. He walked over to Rebecca and Catherine. "Excellent work, Mr. Trent," Rebecca said, shaking his hand. "Just doing my job, Counselor," Oliver said, nodding politely to Catherine. "I'm glad we could get your family's legacy back, Mrs. Brooks." "Thank you," Catherine whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Rebecca placed a gentle hand on Catherine's shoulder. "Come on, let's go draft a settlement that leaves him with nothing but his custom suits." Catherine stood up. She smoothed the skirt of her dress, picked up her leather notebook, and walked down the center aisle of the courtroom. She didn't look back at Jonathan. She didn't need to. The man she had loved was gone, replaced by a pathetic criminal who had just destroyed his own life. She pushed through the heavy wooden doors and stepped out into the bright, bustling hallway of the courthouse. The air felt lighter. The oppressive weight that had been crushing her chest for 6 months was gone. She had walked into room 402 as a betrayed wife, but she was walking out as a woman who had reclaimed her history, her dignity, and her future. And as for her great-grandmother's sapphire, it was going to look spectacular at the victory gala. If you loved watching this arrogant husband and his entitled mistress get exactly what they deserved in court, hit that like button right now. Don't forget to share this insane real-life drama with your friends who love a good karma story, and subscribe to the channel for more unbelievable courtroom takedowns and shocking legal twists.